My name is Margaret Collins, and I never thought I would be introduced to the end of my own family at a Thanksgiving table. I was 65, a widow for nearly 2 decades, and I had poured my life into raising my only son, Daniel. That night, I sat at the far end of his dining room, a place I hadn't chosen but had been assigned with a neat little card that read only Margaret, not Mom, not Grandma, just my name in a stiff font, the kind you'd see at a corporate conference, not at a holiday table where love was supposed to matter. The candlelight flickered across polished china, cinnamon sticks tied with twine, and the careful decorations, Rebecca. My daughter-in-law loved to show off. I had brought my own stuffing, baked the way Daniel used to beg for when he was a boy, but no one touched it. Instead, Rebecca's voice filled the air like she owned the season itself. Then Daniel raised his glass. His tone was flat, rehearsed, nothing like the boy who once cried when I left him at preschool. "We took a vote," he said, eyes fixed on me. "You're not part of this family anymore. Mom." The words hit harder than any slap. For a moment I thought it was a cruel joke, some bitter attempt at humor, but Rebecca didn't flinch. She smiled, swirling her wine as if it had been her idea all along. Around the table, silence settled like dust. Even little Ethan, my 9-year-old grandson, lowered his gaze to the cranberry sauce and didn't speak. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. My fork hovered above the plate, the stuffing still untouched, as if the food itself had been cast aside with me. My chest tightened, not from anger alone, but from something sharper, betrayal threaded with disbelief. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. Instead, I folded my napkin carefully across my lap, the way I'd been taught as a girl, as if discipline could shield me. Yet, in that moment, I understood what had been set in motion long before this dinner. They hadn't just served me food, they had served me exile. And I sat there, realizing my place at this table had never been meant for belonging. The week before Thanksgiving, I stopped by Daniel and Rebecca's house with a loaf of pumpkin bread still warm from the oven. Ethan loved it, and I thought Rebecca might appreciate the gesture. The door code hadn't changed, so when Daniel texted that he was at work but I should go ahead, Rebecca's home. I let myself in, just as I had dozens of times before. The air inside was too quiet, the kind of stillness that makes you pause in the doorway. That's when I noticed them, a pair of unfamiliar leather dress shoes neatly placed beside Daniel's sneakers. They weren't the kind of shoes a man forgets after a visit. Polished, deliberate, with an owner who wanted to be noticed. I stood frozen for a breath too long. Then came the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway. Rebecca appeared first, her blouse slightly untucked, her hair falling loose from its usual perfect bun. Behind her came a man I didn't recognize, taller than Daniel, collar misaligned, shirt wrinkled in a way that told its own story. His eyes barely met mine before flicking away. "Oh," Rebecca said, too brightly. "You're early. This is an old friend, just helping with some things for the holiday." She smiled, brittle, already rehearsed. The man nodded without words and disappeared back down the hall. I didn't ask his name. I didn't demand an explanation. Instead, I placed the pumpkin bread on the counter and said softly, "No worries. I didn't mean to interrupt." My voice carried the calm of someone who had lived long enough to know when silence could say more than shouting ever would. Rebecca offered tea, overcompensating with pleasantries, but I declined. I told her I had errands, let her walk me to the door, and drove off without looking back. I told no one, not Daniel, not Ethan. I carried the moment like a stone in my pocket, heavy but hidden. I convinced myself I was protecting them. Yet sitting at that Thanksgiving table days later, the memory pressed harder. whispering that silence had its limits. Back at the Thanksgiving table, I realized the signs had been waiting for me all along. The little details whispered louder than the words. My chair had been placed at the far end, pressed against the swinging kitchen door. Every few minutes, a cousin brushed past me carrying dirty dishes. Once, the door nearly clipped my shoulder. Beside me, a stainless steel trash bin hissed each time someone pressed its pedal. It was as if they wanted me to feel disposable. Rebecca's voice carried from the head of the table, smooth and commanding. She directed the carving of the turkey, commented on the wine, and filled every pause as though the evening belonged solely to her. Daniel nodded at her cues, silent but complicit. When I complimented the glaze on the turkey, he didn't look at me. Instead, he said, "Rebecca does it all. She keeps this family together." His words sliced deeper than the carving knife in his hand. My stuffing sat untouched, the dish I had wrapped carefully in a towel to keep warm. Rebecca took a bite, chewed once, then said with a smile that cut sharper than any insult, "It's a bit sturdy, isn't it? You could build a house with that texture." A ripple of laughter followed, not cruel enough to be obvious, but enough to remind me I had become the punchline. Even Ethan wasn't seated near me. He had been placed between two of Rebecca's cousins, who corrected the way he held his spoon and fed him cranberry sauce. He looked up once, searching for me, then quickly turned back to his plate. My heart clenched. They had made room for me at the table, but not in the ways that mattered. I sat still, napkin folded neatly on my lap, the weight of my silence pressing harder than the candlelight. And in that silence, the truth settled. This wasn't neglect. This was orchestration. As the meal dragged on, I stopped asking myself where I had gone wrong. For years, I thought maybe I was too present, too cautious, too old-fashioned to fit into the life Daniel and Rebecca built. But sitting there, listening to her smooth voice narrating the evening as though I were invisible, I realized it had nothing to do with what I did. It had everything to do with what I knew. Rebecca spoke with the ease of someone who believed the past was buried, who thought the secret I had carried into my car that Tuesday afternoon would never see daylight. She believed silence meant consent. She believed my smile meant surrender. She didn't know that silence had edges. I stared at the polished silverware, my reflection warped in the spoon, and thought about the life they sat upon so comfortably. The house where we gathered? Its deed was tied to the Collins Family Trust, established years ago after my husband's death. The college fund that would someday carry Ethan forward? My signature sat beside Daniel's, never Rebecca's. Even the line of credit that let them appear secure had been backed by my history, my name, my sacrifices. They thought kindness was weakness. They thought I had given without memory. They forgot that my entire career as a probate mediator had taught me the power of paper trails and signatures, the way documents could outlast feelings. I had copies of every form, every deed, every notarized letter filed and sealed. As Rebecca lifted her glass again and announced, "We've got everything handled now," I felt the weight shift inside me. They wanted peace, but only the kind that excluded me. They had erased me from the center of the table, but they hadn't erased me from the foundation beneath it. I lowered my gaze to my plate, the food still untouched. My silence was no longer surrender. It was preparation. And for the first time that evening, I felt something other than grief. I felt resolve. When dessert was served, I pushed my chair back and folded my napkin with deliberate care. Rebecca was too busy chatting with her cousin to notice. Daniel asked absently, "No coffee, Mom," but didn't wait for my answer. No one followed me to the door. No hug from Ethan. No goodbye. just the hum of voices continuing without me as if I had never been there. Outside, the night was sharp and cold. My breath clouded the air as I walked to my car. For a moment, I sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, feeling the truth settle like frost on glass. They had voted me out, erased me with a smile and a slice of pumpkin pie. But the erasure was not complete. Not yet. When I returned home, I didn't cry or pace the hallway. I went straight to my study, a room I rarely entered anymore. The desk drawer slid open with a creak, and there it was, the folder I hadn't touched in months. Inside lay the foundation of their lives: copies of the property deed, co-signed loan agreements, authorization letters, notarized trust documents, even emergency revocation forms already drafted, waiting for nothing more than a signature and a date. I sat down, the lamp casting a golden circle over the papers. My pen hovered above the page. It wasn't doubt that stalled me. It was finality. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about what you do when your own son tells you you no longer belong. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered aloud to the empty room, "It's time." The next morning, I called Richard, the attorney who had guided me through my husband's estate. He didn't ask for context. He knew me well enough to hear what my voice carried. "We'll begin immediately," he said. And as I hung up, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in years: control returning to my hands. By sunrise, the papers were already in motion. Richard filed the necessary documents to freeze access to the trust, a quiet ripple that would soon feel like a wave inside Daniel and Rebecca's carefully curated life. It was a step I had prepared for years without fully admitting it, and now it was unfolding with the precision of clockwork. That evening, as I sat in my kitchen sipping tea, I opened the old photo tucked into my phone, the one I had snapped in Rebecca's hallway without meaning to, my hand trembling as I balanced the pumpkin bread in the other. Her blouse was untucked, her lipstick smudged, and behind her stood that man, his face turned just enough to capture the outline of his jaw, the unfamiliar shoes by the door sealing the picture. Proof, not suspicion. Proof. At exactly 6:05 p.m., I attached the photo to a message and sent it directly to Daniel. No explanation, no caption, just the truth. The phone rang almost immediately. I let it vibrate across the counter. It rang again and again, each call sharper, more desperate. Then came the text. "What is this?" I didn't reply, because deep down, he already knew. He just hadn't wanted to see it. Rebecca had built her identity on control, on perfection, on never letting the mask slip. But the woman in that photo was caught. And Daniel, he could ignore my presence at his table. He could dismiss my words, but he could not dismiss this. I turned off the phone and let the silence return, not out of cruelty, but peace. There was nothing more to explain. The first strike had landed, and the unraveling had begun. By morning, Richard confirmed the freeze was complete. Rebecca's cards would start to decline, their credit line locked. I folded the message in my mind like a sealed envelope and waited. The storm was only beginning. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. By the end of the week, Rebecca's carefully polished world began to stumble. At a boutique downtown, her card was declined. She tried another, and that one failed too. I imagined her painted smile faltering in front of the cashier, her voice tightening as she insisted there must be a mistake. There wasn't. The freeze had spoken louder than I ever could. The car was next, a gleaming SUV she drove to Pilates classes and charity luncheons. I had co-signed that lease years ago when Daniel's credit couldn't hold the weight. Rebecca must have forgotten, or perhaps she never cared to know, that my name still sat on the paperwork. So when the tow truck rolled into the parking lot outside her gym, there was no warning, no grace period, just the sight of her prized vehicle being lifted away while her friends looked on. Daniel texted me 2 nights later. "You blindsided me." I stared at the message for a long time, then placed the phone face down. The word echoed in my mind. Blindsided? No, I thought. I had simply remembered everything he had chosen to forget, whose credit saved them, whose trust sheltered their home, whose savings steadied their marriage in those reckless first years. The house itself stood on shifting ground now, its ownership tangled in documents they had signed but never studied. Each file bore my signature, the one they had tried to erase from their holiday table. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to show up at their doorstep. The foundation of their comfort was already tilting beneath them, and while Rebecca scrambled to maintain her image, while Daniel wrestled with the truth he could no longer deny, I sat in my living room, the fire glowing steady, and waited for what would come next. 2 weeks after that Thanksgiving, I saw Rebecca's familiar name flash across my phone, not in a message but in a social media post. She had uploaded another carefully staged photo, a golden roast in the center of the table, wine glasses raised, the caption dripping with sentiment, "Family is everything." I should have scrolled past, but my eyes caught on a detail in the frame. 8 seats were arranged neatly around the table. 7 were filled. 1 at the far end sat empty. The camera angle made it impossible to miss, as though the chair waited for someone who hadn't arrived. My breath caught when I saw what lay across that untouched plate, a cream linen napkin, hand-stitched with small loops along the edge. I had made that set myself during the long winter after Thomas died, sewing by lamplight to keep my hands busy when grief threatened to crush me. I had brought them to Daniel's house years ago, leaving them for special occasions. One of them now sat folded with care, laid out as if I might still appear. I stared longer than I meant to. Was it Rebecca's oversight? Forgetting to remove the napkin? Or was it Daniel, unable to erase me completely even as he tried to? Perhaps no one noticed at all. But I noticed. The empty chair carried more weight than any words spoken that night. For a fleeting moment, I imagined Ethan slipping that napkin onto the plate himself, saving a place for me the way children do when they don't understand why someone is gone. The thought softened me, even as I knew it might not be true. I closed the app, set down my phone, and let the quiet of my own living room wrap around me. They could post their curated family, but even in their perfection, my absence left a shadow they could not stage away. The letter arrived 3 days before Christmas, a thick envelope with Rebecca's handwriting across the front, the kind of cursive meant to look elegant but straining too hard. I held it for a long time before opening, knowing whatever was inside would not be apology but demand. I was right. Inside, a single printed sheet, no greeting, no warmth, just one centered sentence in a stiff serif font. Can we discuss reinstating access to the college fund? Not, "We're sorry." Not, "We were wrong." Not even "Merry Christmas." Only a plea dressed up as negotiation. I read it twice, then a third time, the words sinking like stones. The college fund had been my gift to Ethan on his 2nd birthday. I had opened it with my own name tied to every clause and amendment, a promise that his future would be protected no matter how careless his parents became. Now, after erasing me at their table, after laughing at my place beside the trash, they suddenly remembered who held the key. I walked to my desk, slid a clean sheet of paper into the printer, and typed a single word: no. No signature. No return message. Just that. I folded it neatly into a plain envelope, sealed it, and mailed it the same afternoon. That evening, As the neighborhood lights twinkled against the snow, I imagined Rebecca opening my response. I pictured her face, painted with indignation rather than shame, because for someone like her, denial would always feel like cruelty. But I didn't feel cruel, I felt clear. The college fund wasn't leverage. It was Ethan's safeguard, and it would remain under my terms, not theirs. They had voted me out of their family, but they could not vote me out of my own integrity. On Christmas Eve, my house glowed with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. The fire crackled in the hearth, its light dancing across the walls, and the table was set not with linen napkins I had stitched long ago, but with simple plates and bowls borrowed from the neighbors who joined me that night. There were 3 of them, retired, kind, the kind of people who knew the value of company without performance. We shared a pot of hearty soup, passed around bread still steaming from the oven, and laughed at the absurd plots of old holiday movies playing softly in the background. No one raised a glass to exile anyone. No one pretended perfection. For the first time, I didn't serve the stuffing Daniel used to beg for or the cranberry glaze I had made every Thanksgiving since he was a boy. Instead, I tried something new, a sweet potato gratin with rosemary from the little planter I kept near the kitchen window. The scent filled the room, bright and earthy, like a beginning rather than a memory. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder whether Daniel and Rebecca had left a chair empty again, or if Ethan saved me a candy cane like he promised. I let the thought drift away with the snow that fell quietly outside, blanketing the street in silver calm. What mattered was here, this table, this fire, this moment. The life I had been waiting to be invited into was already mine to live. As I blew out the candles that night, I felt the heaviness of years lift from my chest. They had voted me out of their family, but I had chosen something stronger than their vote. I had chosen myself, and in that choice, I discovered belonging again, not in their house, but in my own. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.